Have you ever had a moment so cruel it almost felt surreal? When the room suddenly feels smaller and your heart pounds, not from anger, but from shock. That's what it felt like. I laughed nervously, waiting for her to say, "I'm kidding." But she didn't. She just smirked, that familiar, perfect princess expression, the one that always said she had the full support of everyone around her. And she did. My parents stood behind her, silent. My mother looked away. My father shifted awkwardly as if my pain was too inconvenient to acknowledge. Their silence was worse than her words, because silence meant agreement. In that split second, every insecurity I'd tried to bury over the years came rushing to the surface. That maybe I really was the black sheep, the one too emotional, too messy, too different. That maybe I really didn't belong in this family anymore. She called it a clean start, said I was always a little too much drama, that my energy would ruin the day. My energy, as if I was some kind of emotional contaminant. And yet, in the strangest way, part of me almost understood. For years, I'd been the one quietly holding everything together, the one who apologized first, who adjusted, who made peace when she started fights. Maybe disappearing was exactly what they wanted. But here's the thing no one expected. When you tell someone to disappear, they might actually listen. And when they do, when they finally stop existing the way you wanted them to, you might just lose more than you bargained for. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed, still in shock, staring at the packed suitcase I hadn't planned to use, and one thought kept looping in my head, steady as a heartbeat. If my absence is the greatest gift she could imagine, then she's about to receive the most unforgettable present of her life. Because I was going to grant her wish, but not in the way she ever expected. You know how families always say blood is thicker than water? In ours, that blood felt like syrup, sticky, sweet on the surface, but impossible to wash off once it turned dark. My sister Emma was born 2 years after me, and from the very first day I was told to look out for her, share everything, be the bigger one. And I did. I shared my dolls, my friends, even my dreams. She shared her spotlight. When I got an A, my parents said, "Well, of course you did. You're the hardworking one." When Emma got an A, they clapped like she'd reinvented math. That difference, it seeps under your skin quietly until you stop competing because you know you can't. Growing up, I learned the art of staying small. Smile, nod, let her shine. Don't correct her when she takes credit for your ideas. Don't cry when she ruins your favorite shirt and laughs. Just be grateful for family. That's what good daughters do, right? But being good comes at a price. You start disappearing long before anyone asks you to. I remember one Christmas, my parents gave her a new camera and gave me a sweater 3 sizes too big. "It'll fit one day," Mom said. I laughed like it didn't hurt. Maybe it wouldn't have mattered if Emma wasn't so good at twisting things. Whenever I stood up for myself, she played the victim. She'd cry, and somehow I'd end up apologizing. And the worst part? Everyone believed her. By the time we were adults, she'd perfected her role. The successful one, the charming one, daddy's girl. I was just there, quiet, dependable, always the afterthought. I moved out earlier than she did, bought my first condo through sheer exhaustion and 70-hour weekends. No one came to see it. No one asked how I managed. Meanwhile, when she finally said yes to Christian, a man she'd been dating less than a year, our parents threw a party that might as well have been a royal coronation. I smiled through the entire thing, pretending the lump in my throat was pride. But inside, something cracked. Not because she was getting married, I was happy for that, but because as they toasted her joy, it hit me. All my sacrifices never bought me love. They just made me invisible. So when she finally said those words about the gift of my disappearance, it didn't come out of nowhere. It was the grand finale of a lifetime of subtle rejection. Still, hearing it aloud did something to me. It snapped that invisible tether that had kept me tied to their approval. That night, I stopped being the quiet sister. I stopped waiting for their kindness. And as I stared at her perfect wedding invitation glinting on my dresser, I whispered to myself, "Fine, you want me gone? You'll get exactly what you asked for. Just not the way you think." The morning after she said it, I woke up with that cold, hollow feeling you get after someone breaks your heart. But this heartbreak wasn't romantic. It was ancestral. It was every ignored birthday, every polite smile I had to fake at her celebrations while no one noticed I was falling apart inside. My apartment felt quieter than usual that morning, but the silence was sharp, not peaceful. Coffee didn't taste like coffee. It tasted like defeat. Was I really about to walk away from my entire family? Could I do that? My phone buzzed. A group chat photo popped up. Her parents, Emma, her fiancé, everyone smiling at the wedding rehearsal. I wasn't tagged. No one had even asked if I was coming. I stared at it for a while, and then something shifted. It was like a movie montage flashing in my brain. Every time my efforts were overlooked, every apology I gave for things I didn't do, every time Emma had smiled sweetly while twisting the knife, I realized I'd been auditioning for a role in my own family that was never going to be written for me. So I stopped. I packed a suitcase, the bare essentials, documents, laptop, the necklace my grandmother had given me. I looked at the condo keys sitting on my desk. That place was supposed to be my victory, my proof that I could survive without their approval. But now it felt just like another weight tying me to years of trying too hard. When someone tells you they don't want you around, walking away isn't weakness, it's self-defense. I called my real estate agent. "I'm ready to sell," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. She probably heard the tremor underneath, but I didn't care. By noon, the condo listing was live. By that evening, I'd cut off my social media. The family group chat stayed silent. No one asked where I was. That silence told me everything. Then came the other thought, the darker one, the kind that makes you feel a little wicked, but also, for once, powerful. If Emma wanted me gone so badly, if disappearing was her dream wedding gift, what if I gave her exactly that? Not silently, not tearfully, but memorably. Something that would make her remember what she had done to me, to us, for the rest of her perfect little life. I pulled out a sheet of paper and started to write. And with every word, something inside me finally exhaled. By the time the wedding countdown hit 3 days, my sadness had hardened into focus. I'd stopped crying. I'd stopped begging the universe to make her kinder. Instead, I started planning. It wasn't revenge. At least that's what I kept telling myself. It was truth. Raw, unedited truth wrapped in a neat little bow. My version of a wedding gift. The condo sale went faster than I expected. The buyer wired the money up front. I signed the paperwork remotely. Just like that, I untied the last thread binding me to my old life. I transferred a portion of the funds to a foundation that helps women who've been emotionally abused by family. The rest I reserved for my own new beginning. But I had one last thing to do before disappearing. I started writing the envelopes. One for every wedding guest, 60 in total. Each one contained a note, handwritten in ink that bled at the edges. They weren't angry letters, no insults, no theatrics, just memories. Precise, undeniable memories that painted the truth no one wanted to acknowledge. Like the time Emma lied to get me grounded for something she did, or the night she started a rumor that cost me my first real relationship, or how my parents always pretended not to see. I wrote them like I was telling a story, not for pity, but for freedom. Each envelope began the same way. There's another side to this family's story. When I finished, I stacked them in a neat pile and sealed them with wax, labeling each one with the guest's name. As I held the last envelope, I pictured their faces opening them, eyes widening, forks freezing mid-air, whispers spreading like cracks in porcelain. I didn't want to ruin her wedding day. I just wanted her to feel what it's like to have a version of yourself exposed without your permission. The next day, I mailed them to the venue with special instruction to distribute them at the reception right after the toast. The catering manager didn't ask questions. Money makes silence easy. That night, I sat by the window of my half-empty apartment, watching the city lights flicker like tiny promises. For years, I'd wished someone would finally see me. Now, they would. But as the air grew colder and my departure drew closer, a quiet fear settled underneath my satisfaction. What if they still found a way to twist this too? What if even the truth couldn't free me? Then I remembered her smug smile, the one that said I wasn't worth belonging to, and my hands stopped shaking. No, I thought, they won't forget this. Not this time. Morning sunlight spilled through half-drawn curtains, that pale, almost apologetic light that somehow knows it's intruding on your peace. I'd barely slept. My packed suitcase sat by the door, silent proof that after today, I'd be gone. But before leaving, I had one last performance to complete. Breakfast tasted like cardboard, but I forced every bite down. It's strange how your body goes on autopilot while your mind replays every painful memory like a movie you can't turn off. I thought about the first time Emma braided my hair before school and told me we'd always be a team. I thought about when we were teenagers and she swore she'd never replace me with anyone. How easily promises rot with time. By 10 a.m., my hands shook so badly I nearly spilled coffee all over my dress. Nerves have a smell, like metal. I could taste it. My phone buzzed again. A message from my mother, "Don't cause a scene today." That was it. Not, "Are you okay?" Not even, "See you soon." Just a warning, as if I was already guilty of something. In that second, I realized they weren't expecting me to attend the wedding. They were expecting me to behave in absence. It almost made me laugh. They'd get their wish soon enough. I took a slow breath, slipped on my shoes, and stepped outside. The city felt cruelly indifferent. People hurried along the sidewalks, not knowing someone's whole world was ending beside them. I took the long route to the venue, the streets humming with weekend chatter. I wasn't invited, technically, but I knew the hotel layout from when we'd toured it months ago, back when I still believed I'd be her maid of honor. Life changes fast, doesn't it? I reached the edge of the garden terrace where the ceremony would be held. White chairs lined up in perfection, ribbons trailing in the breeze. Emma stood with her bridesmaids, radiant and unbothered, posing for photos like nothing dark had ever touched her life. She looked happy, almost angelic. But then she saw me. For a moment, that perfect smile flickered. Her eyes said everything her lips didn't. "Why are you here?" I wanted to tell her I wasn't, really, just a shadow passing through for the last time. After a few seconds, she turned away, pretending not to notice me. Fine. Pretending was what she did best. I slipped back inside, past the staff preparing tables heavy with crystal glasses and folded napkins. My envelopes had already been delivered that morning. I'd confirmed by email. One at every seat card, sealed in deep burgundy wax. A parting gift, wrapped in satin respectability. And as the guests began to fill in, chattering and laughing, I stood, hidden by the corridor arch, heart pounding with every familiar face that passed. Distant uncles, childhood neighbors, my old piano teacher, each of them carried a thread in the tapestry of our family's lies, and soon those threads would start to unravel. But even as I watched, that wicked flicker of anticipation mingled with something else. Grief. Because beneath all the spite, I didn't really want to hurt her. I just wanted her to see me. For once. But some people refuse to look until the mirror shatters. The music started. The guests hushed, and as Emma walked down the aisle, all eyes on her, my throat ached with something between love and loss. The ceremony blurred past me. I couldn't stay. I didn't belong in that picture-perfect world. So while the crowd toasted their champagne, while they laughed and congratulated her, I quietly slipped out the side door into the cool afternoon air. My heart hammered so hard, it almost felt proud. This was it. The clock was ticking. And somewhere inside that golden ballroom, 60 sealed truths waited to erupt like buried dynamite.
I wish I could tell you I watched what happened, but I didn't need to. I felt it from the parking lot, the way you feel thunder before the lightning hits. The air changes first, the laughter softens, then comes the quiet before the storm. I sat in my car with the engine off, staring at the steering wheel, whispering to myself to breathe. You're done. You don't owe them anything more. But that didn't stop the knot in my stomach from tightening when, through the open window, I heard the muffled cheer that followed the father of the bride toast. That meant the manager was starting to hand out the envelopes just on cue. I unclenched my fists, my palms left damp impressions on my skirt. At first, silence, then murky, rising voices. A few blurred gasps carried through the half-open doors, followed by the metallic clink of dropped cutlery. I could almost see it playing out. Guests curious, then startled, Emma blinking in disbelief as the first whispers reached her table. I pictured her mother-in-law squinting through her glasses, my aunt clutching her pearls, my cousin stifling a laugh that wasn't really a laugh. Chaos disguised as confusion. Part of me wanted to dive back in, to see her face, to watch the facade crack. But another part, stronger, calmer, said no. Watching would pull me back into the quicksand. Instead, I sat there listening, and when I finally saw two bridesmaids burst through the side door, their dresses billowing, faces pale with shock, I knew the explosion had started. My phone buzzed, text after text lighting up the screen, from Mom, from Dad, even from Emma herself. I didn't open them. I just stared as the messages stacked up one after another, angry words, desperate words, then blank ones. Funny how people only remember your number when they need someone to blame. I turned the engine key halfway, then stopped. I suddenly wondered if I'd gone too far. Maybe I should have just left quietly, no envelopes, no confessions. Would I have felt lighter? Or would the silence have followed me forever, whispering, "You let them erase you again"? A gust of wind swept across the lot, carrying the faintest trace of violin music from inside the hall. It struck me that right that moment, Emma's perfect day was collapsing in on itself, and somehow my chest still hurt for her. Because even through all her cruelty, she was still my sister. But this was the price of pretending too long. I shifted the gear into reverse, ready to leave it all behind. That's when I heard my name echo faintly. I looked up. Emma stood in the doorway, her white dress stained at the hem, her veil ripped slightly at the edge. She looked smaller than I'd ever seen her. Our eyes met across the distance. For a heartbeat, time stopped. No anger, no gloating, just two sisters standing in the wreckage of everything unsaid. She opened her mouth like she wanted to speak, but the words never came. She just stared, frozen, as if seeing me for the first time. And then I did what I promised. I disappeared, drove away from the venue, from the endless loop of guilt and approval. In the rearview mirror, the hotel shrank to a blur. The truth was out now. There was no going back. The highway finally swallowed the city. I pulled onto the shoulder and cut the engine. The silence was deafening.
For the first time in years, no one was talking over me, judging me, demanding that I apologize for existing. You'd think that kind of quiet would feel like peace. At first, it just felt empty. My hands still trembled on the wheel. I sat there for what must have been an hour, letting the adrenaline drain. There was a part of me that wanted to cry, another that wanted to laugh, and a much smaller part that wanted to turn around and check on her. That last part stung the most. Even after all that, love still found tiny corners to hide in. The next morning, I checked my phone. The unread message count had climbed into the hundreds. I opened none of them. Instead, I packed what little I had left, closed the blinds of the now bare condo, and left the keys on the counter for the buyer's agent. That click of the door behind me sounded like a chapter sealing shut. Life didn't instantly become easier. Freedom never arrives wrapped neatly. The first days were strange. Each grocery run, each small interaction felt slippery, like I was learning how to be seen again. I rented a small studio near the coast, the kind of place where the ocean hum covers every anxious thought. Nights were the hardest. I'd stare at the ceiling, hearing my sister's voice in my memory, caught between guilt and relief. 2 weeks later, an email arrived from a distant cousin who was at the wedding. I hesitated before opening it. One line caught my breath. "You told the truth everyone else was too afraid to say." Then another, "After you left, people started admitting things. It was messy, but it was real." For the first time, I smiled without forcing it. Maybe that's all I'd ever wanted, to break the surface tension, to let honesty breathe. I wasn't interested in revenge anymore. I was interested in becoming someone who didn't vanish when others said, "Leave." I spent the rest of that evening walking along the shoreline, barefoot, tracing my reflection in the wet sand. The world kept moving. Somewhere miles away, Emma was probably still piecing together her version of events, the family spinning new stories to patch the cracks. They could. I wouldn't fix it this time. By the time the sun dipped below the water, I finally said it out loud. To the ocean, to myself, to the ghosts of every argument I'd lost. You can't erase me anymore. The waves didn't answer, but they didn't need to. Their rhythm said it for me. 3 months passed before I saw her name again. I'd started to build a rhythm. Morning walks by the coast, freelance work that kept food on the table, the kind of quiet that no longer felt like punishment. So when a thick, cream-colored envelope arrived with her handwriting across the front, my stomach twisted. For a long minute, I just held it, wondering whether I wanted to open another wound. The paper smelled faintly of roses. She always did love her perfumes. Inside were 2 pages, each cramped with her tidy script. The first line hit me like a wave. It's, "I don't know how to start, except to say I read every letter that day." She wrote about the confusion, the whispers, the tears, and how she spent the first week hating me, convinced I'd ruined her life. Then the second page shifted. "But after the guests left," she wrote, "I read yours again. It wasn't until then that I realized how much you'd been carrying, how many times I used you as a shield. I don't know if you meant to free me too, but you did." I read those lines over and over, not quite trusting them. My throat clenched. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't offer any either. It wasn't an apology or a truce, just truth. Plain and fragile, finally spoken between us without witnesses. At the bottom she wrote, "I don't expect an answer. I just needed you to know I see you now." I folded the pages carefully, slipped them back into the envelope, and stared at the ocean through my window. For the first time, memories of us as children drifted in, of summer swings and shared popsicles, long before growing up turned us into rivals. Maybe nothing could fix what we'd broken, but at least the silence had cracked open enough for light to get in. That evening, I lit a candle by the window and whispered, "Thank you." Not to her exactly, more to the ache that had finally softened. Some gifts aren't wrapped, they're written, shaky and honest, miles apart but closer than ever. And as the flame flickered, I realized that sometimes the real closure isn't a reunion or a hug, it's the moment you finally hear your name spoken without blame. After her letter, the world felt different. Not because everything was fixed, but because I'd stopped waiting for it to be. There's a quiet kind of freedom that comes when you stop replaying the old scenes in your head. You start noticing small things again. The taste of morning coffee, the way the sea glows just before sunrise, how laughter sounds when it's not edged with trying to belong. I settled into my new life in a way that surprised me. I taught myself to cook meals that didn't taste like compromise, started taking online classes just for curiosity's sake, photography, literature, all the messiness that parents call impractical. It felt good, coloring outside the lines I'd been given. Sometimes I'd think about the condo, about how I'd walked away from everything I'd built and feel a pang of loss. But then I'd remind myself, walls can keep you safe or keep you small. I was done being small. Every few weeks, I'd get small ripples from home. A cousin sending a text, a former neighbor forwarding an old photo of us as kids. The family had stopped speaking to me directly, but their silence no longer scared me. I had learned that distance doesn't always mean isolation. Sometimes it gives you the space to breathe your own name again until it sounds like something you love again. One night, while watching the moon skate across the water, I realized how subtly healing sneaks up on you. It doesn't shout. It just fills the cracks bit by bit, until one day you notice they're no longer there. I wasn't healed completely. I probably never would be. But I was whole enough to start dreaming again. And that, for someone who once felt invisible, is everything. I made a plan that night. To travel, maybe volunteer, to meet people who wouldn't know me as Emma's sister, but simply as me. No labels, no shadows. I wanted a life that felt hand-stitched, even if the threads were uneven. And as I drifted to sleep, the thought that lingered wasn't bitterness or bravado, it was gratitude. Because sometimes the cruelest words you'll ever hear can turn into the push you desperately needed. Emma had asked me to disappear, but in walking away, I'd finally appeared to myself. A year later, I found myself standing on a train platform with only a backpack, a camera, and a small journal. The world around me buzzed with motion. Families hugging goodbye, teenagers laughing over headphones, announcements echoing overhead. I was no longer running away from something. I was moving toward it. The woman reflected in the glass of the departures board looked calm, older in the eyes, but lighter in the shoulders. That morning, I received one last message. Not a letter, not a demand, just the simple text from an unknown number. She speaks of you kindly now. It took me a second to realize it was from my father. I let the phone rest in my palm, the words vibrating through me like a final chord resolving a song. No explanation, no apology, but sometimes a gentle acknowledgement is all left to give. As the landscape blurred past my train window, I began writing in the journal. Not about anger or hurt, but about ordinary joys. The smell of rain through an open window, the laugh of a stranger that sounded like home. Every line felt like a stitch in a new tapestry, one I was weaving for myself. Occasionally, I'd reread Emma's old letter, not to reopen wounds, but to remember where the scars came from and how they no longer defined me. I still didn't know if we'd ever meet again, and that was okay. Some stories don't need sequels. They just need understanding. As the train carved through miles of countryside before the sea reappeared outside my window, glinting like 1,000 tiny mirrors, I could almost hear Grandma's voice, soft and steady, saying, "The greatest gifts never come wrapped. They come revealed." Maybe that was what this whole mess had been. Revelation disguised as heartbreak. I leaned my head against the glass and whispered to the reflection, "You made it. Not angry, not broken, just true. And for the first time, I believed it completely. Because the gift my sister had asked for, the gift of my disappearance, had granted me something far greater. The chance to start my own story in my own voice, without permission. As the train curved toward the horizon, sunlight pooling across the seats, I closed my eyes and smiled. Disappearing had never been the ending. It was the beginning. Months rolled on like steady waves. I built small routines that fit the size of my new life. Saturday markets, calls with the few friends who truly stayed, photos that captured nothing glamorous, just light falling on ordinary things. Healing turned out to be less like climbing a mountain and more like tending a garden. Quiet work, tiny progress, the patience to wait through bad weather. Some evenings, when the sky burned orange over the water, I'd reread the last page of that journal and feel the old ache surface. Not to punish myself, just to remember how far I'd come. People talk about closure as if it's a door that locks cleanly behind you. It isn't. It's more like those old wooden gates that swing open and shut with the wind. You hear them creak sometimes, but they don't stop you from walking forward. One night, I left a small envelope by the sea. Inside, a letter addressed simply, "To whoever needs to be seen." It told the story of two sisters, of silence, and of finding yourself on the other side of being unwanted. I hoped a stranger might find it and feel a little less alone. As I watched the tide carry it away, I realized that was the truest version of me, the one who could share pain without drowning in it. Life didn't turn cinematic, bills still came, loneliness still visited, but it sat beside me now, quietly, not as an enemy, but as a reminder that I was alive, that I could feel deeply and still keep going. Sometimes I think about Emma, somewhere out there living her version of peace. I hope she found it. I've stopped needing to know, because the real victory isn't in proving anyone wrong, it's in not needing to anymore. When people ask about my family now, I tell them the truth with a smile, that some love stories end not with forgiveness, but with understanding, and that's still a kind of happy ending. And if I ever meet someone standing where I once stood, desperate to belong where they aren't wanted, I'll tell them this: disappear if you must, but never stop existing, because vanishing from their world might just be the first step towards appearing fully in your own.